Alright, so in the lecture notes there are a couple more pages talking about different types of errors, type 1 and type 2, how they're interpreted. We'll talk about that after exam 3. We don't have enough time right now to get into it. It is important, but it just won't fit on exam 3. So instead, we'll spend the last few minutes here in this mysterious electronic lecture that hopefully is going well, talking about how to analyze raw data. So this handout is on Canvas. You should have gotten a message about it. You've seen some problems like this in my stat lab. So it'll say something along the lines of, suppose you want to estimate the true average height in inches of STA261 students. So you take a random sample of 6, and there are your measurements. Create a 95% confidence interval for the true mean height. So we're trying to estimate a mean, mu. We have data, and we want a confidence interval. So we should use t interval, but it wants to know what's x bar, what's s, what's n. Okay, well, x bar, that's pretty straightforward. Add your data points up, divide by 6, there's your sample mean. N, the sample size, pretty simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 data points. Where it gets tricky is the standard deviation. We have a formula for it. We've talked about it before. Your calculator will compute it, but it's just sort of a pain. So what we'll do is we will end up using this t-interval formula. It will compute all of this stuff for us, all of the summary statistics, so we don't have to do that manually. So I give you a couple of ways to analyze raw data. The first one is the one you should use. That's with your calculator. That's what you would have to use on an exam. But I also show you how to analyze it in StatCrunch. So as you're doing the MyStatLab problems, you can use StatCrunch. That's perfectly fine. It's always there for you to use. So I'm not going to read through the instructions. I'll just show you how to do it. So to enter the data into the calculator, you're going to press Stat as if you're going to go do a t-test or something, but you're going to stay on the first screen that says Edit, and you're going to select Edit. So I've already got the data typed in here. You probably won't, but you'll have some lists, L1 through L6. You can use the arrows to change the list that you want. If you don't start at L1, you have something else, let me know and I'll tell you how to fix it, but I'm going to assume that you have these same lists. I'm also going to assume that you probably have numbers in your lists already. So unless you have a brand new calculator, there's probably something in there. So what you'll want to do is press the up arrow so that you highlight L1, and if you press clear and enter, it will delete the whole list. Okay, you need to start with a blank list. So now what we're going to do is type in the data points one by one. So the first height we had was 61. Press enter. So there it is. We don't use commas like we did with, say, normal CDF. We just type them in one at a time, pressing enter after each value. So be careful. Type in the data carefully. Okay, so when you're done, the blank value will be highlighted and it says L17. So that's telling you the blank is the 7th value, so there's nothing in the 7th value, which means you have 6 data points. That matches the sample size. So we read through those. Yep, looks like we've typed things in correctly. Okay, at this point we're done. So we know that we're going to create a confidence interval. So we can just go straight to t-interval. So we can just press stat, scroll over to tests, and go to t-interval. Now, we don't have stats. We don't know x bar, s, or n. or at least we weren't provided those. So we're going to select data. So a little bit of a simpler input. The first thing it wants to know is the list. Where did you put your data? Okay. I always use L1. That's sort of the default. If you put your data in a different list, how would you change or how would you specify which list you put your data into? Well, if you look above the numbers 1 through 6, in yellow you'll see L1 through L6. If you haven't realized yet, anything in yellow, if that's what you want, you have to press the second button first. So if you put your data in L5, you're going to have to press second 5, and now it says L5. Okay. Ours, at least if you've followed me, that's an L1, so you would press second 1. For the frequency, just leave that at 1. You don't need to do anything with it, just leave it at 1. And then your confidence level, that will be provided to you in the problem. That's 95% for now. So you press calculate. Takes a second. And there you go. So you'll get your confidence interval just like before, and then it gives you your summary stats, 66, 4.8, and 6. So if you had computed these by hand, that's what you would get. So this example was for a confidence interval for a mean. The same process works for a hypothesis test for a mean. So if you go over to stat tests and you do a t-test, it's exactly the same. We have to change the value from the null hypothesis, so 65 or whatever you think the true mean height is. Maybe we think that the true mean is not 65. Again, whatever the problem is telling you. Press calculate and it goes through the same process. You'll get a p-value and then you can interpret it just like before. So all that's different when you're given the raw data is you don't have the summary statistics. So we type the data into the calculator by inputting it into a list. Tell either t-test or t-interval, whatever function you need for your particular problem, what list to use, and it will do the rest. I won't give you the raw data for proportions, so I won't give you a big list of yeses and nos. I don't think my stat lab does. So the only time you'll see raw data is when you're interested in estimating a mean. So you're using t-test or t-interval. Okay, so that's that. If you have questions, send me an email, bring it up in review. So we'll talk more about exam 3. That's everything from chapter 7 through chapter 9, excluding the type 1 and type 2 errors at the end of the chapter 9 notes. Hopefully this went well. Seems to go well in my little test videos that I created. But if you have questions or if you had problems, let me know.